Welcome to Inside the Issues. I'm Amrit Singh. On a night where President Donald Trump has issued an executive order to crack down on homeless encampments via involuntary hospitalizations nationwide, let's begin the show by holding two facts about homelessness together to see a bigger story. Fact one, this month, the Los Angeles Homeless Services Authority, or LAHSA, found homelessness trending in the right direction for 2 straight years. Fact two, the CEO of LAHSA resigns tomorrow. So let's start with the numbers. The point-in-time homeless count showed a decrease in overall homelessness and unsheltered homelessness. It found that overall homelessness dropped in the city of LA by 3.4% last year, while unsheltered homelessness fell by nearly 7.9%, 8.79%, I should say. It's the second consecutive year that LAHSA has showed a decrease in both categories. That number is 7.9%. And LAHSA CEO has said LAHSA deserves credit for innovative solutions and systemic change and working arm in arm with their partners. It doesn't really sound like the statement of someone who's on their way out, but Dr. Adams-Kellum is resigning amidst audits and questions of LAHSA's efficacies and practices. Audits from the LA City Controller and the LA County Controller, and a big one from federal Judge David O'Carter, showed LAHSA wasn't able to track how it spent about $2.4 billion of city funding. Soon after that, the LA County Board of Supervisors voted to cut off more than $300 million to the agency and set up its own housing authority. And after that, LA City Council voted to explore pulling city funds from the organization too, and potentially form an authority all its own. There's a lot there, and all of this tips up some big questions for the future of homelessness spending and services, how to structure and reimagine homelessness services and spending at a moment where things seem to be inching in the right direction. With us now is the perfect person for that conversation. It is the chair of LA City Council Housing and Homelessness Committee, LA City Councilmember Nithya Raman from District 4. We really appreciate having you here. Welcome back in.
Thank you so much for having me again.
It's a mouthful to get through with what's happening with this issue of homelessness. It's one that you think about all the time. I guess let's just begin with the numbers, the point-in-time count. How are we feeling about what we're seeing?
Well, the 8% reduction in unsheltered homelessness, and to me, unsheltered homelessness is the number that matters for me the most. That's the number that people see when they're going down the street. That's the people in tents. That's the people in RVs. It means that that number went down by 8% this year and by more than 10% last year in the city of LA. So we've made significant progress on reducing unsheltered homelessness now 2 years in a row after years of double-digit increases in homelessness in Los Angeles. It is a remarkable turnaround. That doesn't mean we don't have an enormous amount of work to do ahead, right. But I think it is a moment to say, hey, finally, we seem to be moving in the right direction. What can we learn from this moment, and how do we make sure we're doing more of it? We
celebrated a positive number on the show with you last year. We do it again. We pause to acknowledge that. There's lots to talk about what is going right, what more can we do, because there is a lot more to do. But before we even get there, I mean, the assumption here is that we're taking LAHSA and the numbers at its word. It's a point-in-time count. It's done a month after the fires because it was supposed to happen during the fires. Of course, the fires precluded that. And the RAND Corporation, for instance, looked at this and said, you know, when we looked at our 24 numbers with the LAHSA's 24 numbers, it was off by like 20, 40, 50, 60% in some specific areas, right? So they were just calling into question the methodology, which also changed to like a full digital model. There's a lot there. How do you feel about the LAHSA numbers?
Well, so I want to cite this RAND study again. It's an independent study. It's a multi-year study. Last year, they found some numbers at variance. They do it in 3 neighborhoods, Skid Row, Hollywood, and Venice. Hotspots for homelessness. Right. This year, that same study found a 15% drop in unsheltered homelessness across those 3 neighborhoods, and even sharper drops in particular neighborhoods that they looked at. So you're looking at the PIT count, which is showing an 8% drop in unsheltered homelessness, the RAND study, an independent study identifying a 15% drop in unsheltered homelessness in these homelessness hotspots. So I think there is something to trust in these numbers. It certainly feels like we're moving in the right direction. And just for me, as someone driving around my district, you know, driving around the city, I can see that big encampments that were there when I first started in my role are no longer there, and they're not returning, because we're not just pushing people across the street, we're actually moving them into shelter.
The trajectory, even whether you're talking about RAND or LAHSA or whatever, it's going in the right direction. So let's take it there and we move on. And we talk about the sustainability of all this. I mean, part of this is Inside Safe, and we can talk about the cost of that, which I'd love to do with you in a second, because people are saying, hey, Inside Safe has helped, especially with the unsheltered part.
Absolutely.
You get people off the streets. but also LAHSA has taken some credit for this. And we just need to talk about LAHSA for a second, because the county's pulled out all of its money.
Yeah.
And in a moment where things are going in the right direction, you went before the county when the county was talking about voting out, saying things are going in the right direction, please don't do this.
Right.
They did it anyway. The city's exploring doing the same, maybe out of necessity, maybe not.
Yeah.
How is LAHSA fair in all of this? How big of a driver was it for this kind of result? And what is the city doing?
Look, I think LAHSA has a lot of work to do in terms of improving its fiscal oversight, managing where money was coming in and where it was going out, and making sure that they were doing appropriate tracking of that. I've heard from providers that they're very bad at getting payments out to providers on time, which is really important for the system. And the county has a better reputation for that, so maybe moving that funding will help in those ways. But the reality is that, you know, for me, in this moment, LAHSA was the engine through which we put our funding. And we increased that funding significantly over the past couple of years, not just through Inside Safe, but thousands of vouchers from the federal government, from the Biden administration, that helped get over 3,000 people off the streets in the city of LA and into housing. I put money from encampment resolution grants that I won from Governor Newsom into shelters and brought people off the street. So across the board, we were expanding shelter, expanding housing. We built a lot more HHH units. We funded that many years ago, and now those units are coming online. Thousands of those opened up over the last few years, and people moved indoors. So to me, what you're seeing is less any one agency doing better or any one piece of the system doing better. It's just that we're making investments in shelter and housing, the thing that really works to get people off the streets, a lot of which is at risk in the coming year.
Right, and talk about the reasons for that. If you think, because, I mean, okay, $300 million the county takes away from LAHSA. The city is still at the moment putting its money into LAHSA, and maybe it's getting those funds out on time or not. There's a question around that. Also, hopefully they're going to track better. Part of that, you set up a Bureau of Homelessness Oversight to help with some of this data collection?
Yes, so one of the things that we realized about the system is LAHSA needs to do better financial tracking, but it also needs to do better tracking of data and outcomes. And that's where we've partnered with LAHSA and had really positive improvement in collecting data about where shelter beds are, who they're actually going to visit on the streets, how long people are staying in encampments, how long people are staying in shelters. And now all of that information is going to be collected through LAHSA, through our service providers, and overseen through a new entity in the city called the Bureau of Homelessness Oversight. The first time that the city of Los Angeles has created a place which is going to track the performance of the dollars that it is spending on homelessness.
People at home are saying, what?
I know, me too.
Why not so far?
Me too. I mean, well, so here's the thing.
No political appetite, the structure.
Here's the thing. The city was never intended in its charter, in the way that a city works, to actually spend on things like social services. That was always the purview of the county. That's what the county is funded to do. The city is actually seeing the gaps in what the county is providing. We are seeing people on the streets that are simply not being addressed through the county systems. So we're putting money into it through our general funds. We're putting money into it from state funds that we're getting. And we don't have the infrastructure. We don't have a department. We don't have people in our system who are charged with that work, and that's what this bureau is going to do. It's going to establish that for the first time and make sure that we're doing the work.
So I also don't hear from you a huge hunger to set up a city-level authority as the way the county did. You're talking a bit about the things that LAHSA is doing well, obviously also the things that LAHSA has taken some heat for, but how are you feeling about that?
So my question is less about whether we should do it or not, and more about the city's capacity to do it. We are not funded for it. We don't have hundreds of staff at a health services agency or a mental health services agency that can be pulled into a new department to work on this issue. We're just not built for that. That's why we, when we were funding this issue, gave the funding to LAHSA, which was supposed to combine city and county dollars and really do the work on the ground, ensure that the entire system was being kind of optimized to get as many people off the streets as possible. It may not have been doing that very well, but that doesn't mean that the city is necessarily equipped to take that on. And that's the question that we're going to be exploring over the next few months. Can we take those contracts in-house and manage that work in-house?
That is a big question. I know you guys are looking closely at that. We have about 2 minutes left. There's a couple of big things I still want to talk to you about. So let's do this as quickly as possible if we can. Inside Safe, people say that helped, especially with unsheltered. But we're looking at, I saw City Watch LA said, okay, it's $470,000 per person to get them into permanent housing based on some of their estimates of not just per night, but overall the $40 million versus the numbers that they've got in. They did this kind of crude division around that. Okay. Is it sustainable? And if not, what do we do to get there?
Look, we have shelters in the district that operate very differently from Inside Safe, and I think that's the model that we need to go towards. Motel and hotel rooms are expensive, but they were done through Inside Safe as an emergency intervention.
Yeah.
We need to now convert them into long-term investments that are more sustainable. We need shelter beds. We don't just need long-term housing. We need shelter that people can transition into. There's no question about that. Inside Safe dramatically increase the number of shelter beds that we have in the city. Now let's make them fiscally sustainable. I think we may have moved too slowly on that front, but we need to do that now, and I think it's absolutely urgent given the crises in funding that the system is going to be facing.
And part of it, and you studied urban planning, that's a big part of what you bring to the job. The conversation around inventory is huge because we keep on talking about the ways of getting people off the streets, which, by the way, the president also has an idea about that. I'm going to talk to you about that in a minute too.
Please.
But when you build stuff, coming out of the fires, we've looked at CEQA, rolling it back. We've looked at executive directors from Mayor Bass.
Yeah.
We've been cutting red tape. Where are we with that? Can we get that jump started?
The city has been historically structured around saying no to housing and on kind of slowing down housing. Housing has always been politically unappetizing in this city, and you can see the results of that. We've underbuilt for years. Now we have to undo the bureaucracy that's been set up to say no and make it say yes.
Is it
that
happening?
Means, huh?
Is it happening after the fires?
I'm certainly pushing on it. We are pushing on it through a suite of motions at the city that is basically looking at the hundreds of clearances that you have to get and the pathways that you have to follow in order to get housing built. We're trying to make DWP often the biggest roadblock. People have housing that is built and it doesn't get power for months, which is absolutely frustrating in a housing scarce environment. And so we're going to be pushing on every piece of our bureaucracy to make sure that we are building housing faster. We are getting the city out of its own way.
And can we build the housing fast enough to prevent the involuntary hospitalizations of those on the streets who may have mental health? Because that is what the Trump executive order signed today does. It's called Ending Crime and Disorder on American Streets. There's a lot of different things that it does. It's talking about pulling funding from Housing First cities, LA is one, towards cities that would criminalize or at least certain encampments, which actually LA is that too with 4118. How do you read this executive order right now, and what do you want to say about it?
I mean, to me, it reads like fantasy. Everyone thinks that they can wave a magic wand and end homelessness. Really, the only way to end homelessness is to make our system work better, which is what the Bureau is doing, which is what the city's doing, which is what the changes we're doing are making. What Trump wants to do is to forcibly conserve people with mental illness. He wants to, make sure that he's rewarding cities that are really kind of jailing people who are experiencing homelessness instead of offering them shelter and housing.
These are written in the executive order.
These are written into the executive order. And I will just say to anybody who thinks that these sound like common sense responses to our housing crisis and our homelessness crisis, look at what has been happening related to immigration enforcement over the past few weeks. Look at the cruelty. Look at the fact that people were unconstitutionally, racially profiled. American citizens were detained without access to a lawyer, without access to their families. And to me, this is not an administration that's focused on results. It's focused on being cruel to the people of Los Angeles, and that is what this order is about.
I will say there's a state law, 2023, Governor Newsom signed it into effect, that does allow for some easier involuntary hospitalizations of folks with mental health issues, and grants pass under the 8th Amendment. The Supreme Court might say some of those things are in fact constitutional. It's a big question. We got through an incredible amount, and there's so much more to get through.
There's so much more.
I hope you'll come back soon to talk about it.
Yeah, we have so much more to talk about with our mental health system. To me, the failure of our mental health system lies much more in the fact that we don't have mental health services meeting people where they are, not in our ability to conserve people involuntarily.
And that was a big debate around Prop 1 with what voters passed in, and now we see it come and spun out a different way from the White House. Much more to talk about.
Yes.
Councilmember Raman, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Let Spectrum News be your resource for balanced, in-depth political coverage. And click the subscribe button here. You can also download our app and watch us on TV to learn more about the candidates, where they stand on the issues, and more. We'll see you then.